Hello everyone. Let's talk about inspectors. I will be showcasing many of the great features available inside a modern web browser's web inspector. I will be using Vivaldi, but most of these will work inside any Chromium-based browser like Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Brave, or Opera. Furthermore, Firefox has most of these features available as well. The first thing I'd like to showcase is the screenshot tool. Now, many operating systems have a native way to do screenshots, but what most people may not know is that the browser has a really great tool to do it as well. All you need to do is simply open up your inspector, select the element you want to inspect, and then use your command tool, Control-Shift-P, and do Node Screenshot. This will create a screenshot of your element selected in a nice, easy-to-use format. And we can actually use this on things like Slack or inside ticket systems to easily capture exactly what you wanted to look at. Another tool that I think is really great is the rendering tool. There's a whole bunch of tools inside this drawer. And inside there, one of the favorite things I like is the paint flashing tool. And this kind of helps you figure out where performance or redrawing issues may occur. So as I change about the page and it redraws the DOM or resizes things, you'll see things that get flashed with paint. And that helps you figure out what's being redrawn every time an action occurs. With that, there's also the CSS emulation. So let's take a look at this page on GitHub, which has great CSS properties. They have a lot of tools that help you figure out how to write better CSS. So if we looked at something like prefers color scheme dark, GitHub will automatically read that property from CSS and adjust its screen. You can also do print, and you're telling the browser to pretend that it's in print mode. There's also a bunch of other things like forced colors. So you can kind of change the color palette, and these are all things that the user has control over the browser. Rather than go inside the config and change them, you can just use the rendering tab and quickly change them out. You can also emulate things like vision deficiencies, perhaps blurred vision or different kinds of color blindness. These will help you find things that are broken in your app that are not accessible. While we're speaking about accessibility, we can also, a great tool that's really wonderful to know about is the Styles tab. You've probably already used it quite a bit. But did you know that there's a bunch of things hidden inside here? The Computed tab, for instance, lets you see at a glance what's making this element the way it is. It shows you all the things that are applied to it, and even lets you expand them to figure out where that came from. So I can see this font family came from the styles.css file in that specific line. It'll even take you there. The other thing that the Styles tab does really well is let you modify the CSS quickly. So you might not know that you can just double click into here and change the color to red. And this doesn't actually affect anything, perhaps, but if I change it to background color, there you go. Now I've changed it in the inspector. These are usually pretty obvious tools if you've used the inspector, but I just like to call them out. While we're talking about the inspector, there's this little secret thing in most browsers, the Snippet Tab. And I think this is pretty interesting because you can just open up a Snippet tab, you go to Sources, and in this little arrow menu you can find snippets. And then within the Snippet tab you can actually you can save a bunch of code that you want to reuse over and over again. So here's one that I like to use that lets you add a key listener. So I'm going to save it. You can even give it a name. And then every time you click enter, it'll run that snippet on that page. And if I'm just going to click on here and type out A, B, oops, I have a filter here, C, D, or enter, or shift, or other shift, or control, or other control. And you can see that this script is now saved in my browser. So if I press refresh, it's still there. I can just run it whenever I want to. So this is really great when you want to have some great debugging or different kinds of options. while we're speaking about debugging, one of the great things that's available inside here that is available in most browsers is copy and network requests. Chrome does a great job of this because you can actually copy requests in a couple different formats. So if you go to the network tab and find a request that you like, maybe this JavaScript file, you can copy the network request as a couple different styles of code, including fetch and Node.js fetch, or even curl. This other file format called har, H-A-R, I don't know if that's how you call it, can be imported into things like Postman or other things, Insomnia, to easily recreate that request. So finally in here, that's another, oops, I think I have my rendering tool still on, that paint flashing. Yep. Another great thing in here is the break on change. I call it that, but it's really, you can set it to break on anything. So if I click onto the body, for instance, and then do break on subtree modifications, this will tell the browser every time the body changes, the subtree of the body changes, to run a debugger. So if I click on terminal, now it's caused the debugger to pause exactly where the script started. So I clicked on something and now it's running the debugger. I can kind of dive in here and see what's going on in terms of my code and all that. So if I click through here, you can see all the things that are going on. And that's just one of the many things that the debugger does really well. I think it's something we should look at more detail on a different website. So I'm going to scroll down here, click on my old website, go to the portfolio page, and we can find the sources of this file. There's just one JavaScript file, portfolio.js. So let's make this a little larger and close this down. And portfolio.js just activates whenever you click on one of these items inside the menu. So if I put a debugger right here, I can just put a breakpoint. Now it's going to cause the debugger to pause exactly on that line of code inside the source. We can see that filter val, a variable I have locally, is set to development, which you can verify here on the background of the page. If I let it run through, it's going to actually filter out the items that are development. Again, if I do for flash, it says filter val equals flash. I can click play, and now it's going to filter out there. This allows you to really easily debug from just the browser side. You can certainly add the word debugger inside your code, but from the browser side, maybe you just want to add breakpoints. So this will be the easiest tool available to you, is just using the built-in debugger in the browser, adding breakpoints to live source code. Really great. If we think about source in a different way, there's also the DOM, or the elements on the page. So if I wanted to refer to this system here, let's see, what is this? It's a UL, right? So if I wanted to refer to this ID, I have a number of ways to do that. I can obviously get element by ID using JavaScript, or I can use the browser tools and say, create a global variable. It's going to pop up my console automatically, tell me the name of the variable right here, temp1, and I can actually just refer to it now. And there it is, temp1. Another thing you may not realize though is if I select something in the browser on the Elements tab and press $0, it also creates a temporary variable that way. So $0 is very powerful because it's context aware. If I click around to another LI and do $0 again, it's now highlighting the next LI. So $0 always refers to whatever's selected in the Elements tab. While we're here, we can also think about emulation. So this website was built in about 2009, kind of right around the time that responsive design was being thought about, but not really all the way there in terms of browser features. So with that, we can check if the browser actually is optimized, if the website's actually optimized for responsive sites. There's a little toolbar up here with an icon of a tablet and a phone. You can click on that and then change it to something like an iPhone. And the website's pretty responsive. Not really. I mean, it's not great, but it's not terrible, right? So it works okay. I wouldn't say it's amazing, but it's not definitely broken. One thing that's also interesting here is if I go to like the iPad mini and click on this little toolbar, you can actually add the device frame and give yourself some nice screenshots. I don't know if that one works really well. Where's the one that works really well? Maybe it's not here anymore. Well, it's not working anymore, but they used to show a nice little wrapper around your browser. Lame. Anyways. Besides that, you can throttle, so you can pretend that you have really slow mobile internet and turn it to low in mobile. Click refresh and force your browser to pretend that it's got slow internet. You can see it paint all the images very slowly. Kind of reminds you of the old days when you didn't have good internet. Finally, one tool that's hidden inside here that's not as obvious is this weird toolbar across the top. So you may not realize that there's a bunch of options up here. If you hover, you can zoom out your app. If you click on mobile, it'll zoom in and make it smaller. You can size up each version of your app. And this is just using the dimensions responsive part of the drop down. So dimensions responsive is like a magic responsive little window. You can actually do a lot of stuff like this, or even the vertical space. And this is a lot easier than actually resizing the entire browser window. You can just use dimensions responsive and resize within this little sandbox. So besides that, I think that's all I can show you today that's not obvious. There are a lot of great tools within the inspector that I didn't go over, especially if you look inside this context menu under more tools. There are numerous tools inside here that are amazing and available at your fingertips, but each of them has their own use case, and perhaps not all of them are relevant to your day-to-day. But I think the tools I showed you today should help you out in quite a bit of situations. With that being said, thank you for listening to my Let's Talk episode 1.